Hello everyone, welcome to a Go Global World stream, and today we have an important talk about fundraising methods to get a check. Fundraising is a challenging topic for many entrepreneurs who are at early stage trying to get capital for their ideas or MVPs to build businesses. And here with me today, an experienced person who has experience in fundraising from startup standpoint, but also from investor standpoint. And it's not a usual talk about like some ideas of how to do fundraising. Actually, we want to discuss step-by-step recommendations to get a check. So the final goal is to convince an investor to write you a check. How to do this? What would be the triggers for investors to decide? Here with me, Ken Ma, who actually is a venture fellow at Newchip Accelerator. He's an angel investor with 3 exits, and he made 23 investments. He's also a CEO of AreaHype and HypeX.app. Welcome to our stream, Kenneth. Great to have you. It's already our third video we are doing for our global audience, and I'm really excited to have you here. So please give a few words about yourself, and let's get to the topic.
Yeah, thanks. I had a long journey. Started off in 2008. I've told this story several times, so I'll just cut it, straight to the point. Working on quite a bit of startups. Learned a lot from the failures that I've had. So 80% pretty much failed or broke even. Took each new experience that I had, everything that I learned, and applied it to my next startup. And eventually, I got to where I'm at now, where I know what I'm doing. At least 80% sure, right? Because in the startup world, everything's always changing. So you never really know if it's like 100% I'm going to do it right. We have a good enough idea of how does it work. And then you just apply what you know and just be really confident that, you know, what I've learned has gotten me this far. And I think that I am more capable of doing this, compared to some of my competitors. And so that's really what drives me to get up every day and continue just working on what I need to do to create this next startup.
Yeah. The other day we've done a podcast about crowdfunding campaigns, running a successful crowdfunding campaign, and it actually went so popular on our YouTube channel. People started writing us, texting us for some more information. So I'm really now curious to get your expertise about fundraising methods to get a check. It's just too many videos on the internet giving general advice on this, but like let's get to practical things. Like where would you start with this topic? Like what would be the first thing you would do when you do fundraising?
Yeah. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to understand that the investor is going to do due diligence on you. And so really it's understanding what is the investor looking for. And once you understand that, then it's a matter of curating your narrative or your story so that it fits those specific criterias, as well as it's understanding how do I funnel out these investors after I talk to them, and I get to find out okay who's actually interested, who's a yes, who's a maybe, and who's a no. And so really there's 10 factors that I'll introduce to you guys. Yeah, so we'll start off. The first factor is understanding that every investor, no matter if you're super smart or you just have an idea, they're always going to ask, does your company currently have any revenue or proof that you can generate revenue? And so why is this so important? Well, if you have proof that you can generate revenue or you have revenue right now, it signals to the investor that yes, people like what you're doing. They're paying for this product, they're paying for this service, and that validates that it needs to exist. Right? And so that's super important. That significantly de-risks the investor. And so that if they're going to deploy capital on you, well, if it works with these set of 10, maybe even 100 people, well, it may work for another 1,000 people. The second factor is, does your founding team have a proven track record for success? Right? So this is crazy important because if you're a first-time founder, you don't have a proven track record for success from other startups, Well, maybe you have a proven track record. Let's say if I had a proven track record in sales and marketing, and I'm creating a startup for sales and marketing, obviously it qualifies me to be a quote unquote expert to lead this team for sales and marketing. If I was, on the other hand, a sales and marketing expert and I wanted to lead a team for robotics and AI, and I don't have a background in robotics and AI, well, then that's a risk factor for an investor. So make sure that the people on your team genuinely have some type of synergy or support in a way where it qualifies you to lead this specific startup to solve a problem in an industry that you guys are considered experts in. Otherwise, if you're not an expert, the investor is not going to take you seriously. The third thing is just knowing who are your competitors. Right? If you have no idea who your competitors are, or if you say, well, we don't have any competitors, well, in most cases, this is a red flag for the investor because it's 2022. The odds are that everyone's probably solving the same problem. Everyone's trying to work on something that's very similar, which, there will be competitors. And maybe you just haven't done the research and found out who they are. Now, when you think about it from the investor side, competitors aren't actually a bad thing. Actually, I've only invested in companies that have competitors. And the reason being is if they're competitors, it means that people actually want this problem to be solved. It means that there's actually money being spent to solve this problem. And people need help, right? They literally, they want to invest or they want to have people create startups that solve this problem, right? So keep that in mind when you're going to talk to your investors. The fourth thing is understanding your unique advantage and understanding that, okay, even though we do have competitors, how are we different, right? Because most investors, if you're a SaaS startup, if you're a fintech startup, if you're a travel startup, hospitality startup, we've probably seen it before. If we've seen it before, well, odds are we've seen probably 10 of them. If we've seen 10 of them, then, if you're going to pitch me the same idea that I've probably heard, even though it's not the exact same, it's going to sound like the same thing to me. Right? I'm going to see hundreds of pitch decks all solving the same problem. So really it's identifying how are you different? Like what are those key things that make you so different that, maybe you're a hospitality company, but you have this AI component, which has proprietary technology. Maybe you have strategic partners with, X amount of community members or X amount of distribution channels. Well, then those key differentiating factors makes it insanely harder for your competitors to get those same, unique advantages, which means you have this specific moat against your competitors. The fifth thing is just understanding your market size, right? I've seen this too many times where there's so many investors that, we sit together in this little huddle room on an investor panel, and we see these founders that say, oh yeah, we have a $6.7 trillion market cap on e-commerce. Well, when we think about that, or we hear that as investors, like, okay, great. E-commerce in general, internationally as a whole, is $6.7 trillion. Great, that makes sense. But that itself is not your market cap. You can't do e-commerce for everything, right? Even Amazon doesn't have the whole $6.7 trillion. They have like 40% of it, which, when you have such a large market cap, even 10% is really large, right? So it's understanding, okay, within this specific vertical, within this specific industry, what segment are you targeting, right? So if I'm targeting e-commerce, I'm not going to say I'm raising a seed company for e-commerce for everywhere in the world. I'm raising a seed company for e-commerce just in the US, right? And it's understanding the service obtainable market. Well, out of the whole US, I'm very specific in what I want to focus on. I want to get, let's say, the East Coast, East Coast states, right? And within that, it's understanding the SOM, the obtainable market, that if I do raise capital and I do launch in these East Coast states, what does that opportunity look like, right? And the way I like seeing this is pretty simple. It's understanding, okay, if I charge about $1,000 per customer, well, that is my annual income per opportunity. And I would just find how many opportunities that I want to target. So if I want to target all the major cities, and let's say there's 500 opportunities, I would take the 1,000, multiply that by 500, and I understand, okay, well, the opportunity when I first start is $500,000 service obtainable market. Sixth thing I like to talk about is, well, what are the fundable milestones? Like, why do you need these money? Why do you need this money? Right? So when you think about investors, Well, investors know you're going to spend the money, and so they know, okay, you're going to allocate X amount in, marketing, developing core technology, research, operations. But what are you trying to achieve, right? When you think about, oh, I see, 400,000 is being spent on core technology development. Well, what does that mean? Right? So you have to think about, okay, well, the investor has no idea other than you're spending X amount for this. So you need to clearly state, okay, well, we're spending 400,000 on core technology because we want these fundamental outcomes. And these milestones will be adding 3 new features, deploying into the Android store as well as the iOS store, deploying a web app, building, another project or another prototype for another, piece of technology, which further enhances the pipeline. Right. So those are some things that investors want to know. They want to know that you have these milestones that you're going to be using the capital for, and not just, oh, we're going to spend X amount of dollars out of the raise on this. So other than that, number 7, it's, what market does your product or service address? Right? There's just like so many times where people say, oh yeah, we have this really cool product, really good service, we're creating a startup. But then if you think about it, it's like, who actually needs this? Right? You can have a really cool product, but the need for it hasn't been validated enough where there is a very clear market. And that market's not very clear, signals to the investor that, okay, you probably didn't do enough homework. And if you didn't do enough homework, well, the odds are you're probably not going to be as successful because you don't know that XYZ is going to happen. You don't know that you're going to be successful. And then that poses a big risk because there's so many different variables that theoretically they're all against you. All these variables are by nature obstacles that will make you fail. And if you don't have the research or the understanding of how do we overcome these obstacles, well, then that's a risk for an investor. Factor 8 is understanding intellectual property. Right? So if you have intellectual property, you have patents, you have trademarks, you have copyrights, all these add value to who you are and what company you're from. Right? So think about from the investor side, it's like, okay, you have this trademark, which means, let's say you have this name. Someone can't come in and steal this name. Right? So if you think about, like, prime example, I like this topic, let's say Peekaboo. Right? Snapchat was originally called Peekaboo. Essentially got a lawsuit because there's actually another company that was called Peekaboo that trademarked that name. And so Snapchat had to go back and say, okay, well, we have to change your name. Well, if you change your name, you got to change your branding. Change your branding, change your image. Right? So if you think about this, if you waited too long into the process and you don't have any of these protections, and someone else comes out and trademarks it for you, and they say, okay, well, you're infringing upon our name, you're infringing upon our logo, you're infringing upon whatever, well, then all those years of hard work and branding, marketing you've spent to really create this image or brand, well, then you're at a disadvantage because someone else owns that and they may force you to change that name. Factor number 9 is just understanding, like, do you have a robust plan to scale your business? Right? Most startups that I've talked with, they have, okay, we have an idea. I think I can do this, but really, is that plan robust? Like, do you understand that, okay, I can raise this capital, I can go from point A to point B, but then how do we make some of these things automated? How do we do this so that we can increase our profit margins, right? Or how do we do this? And from a hardware side, how do we decrease the costs? How do we decrease the amount of money spent to purchase X amount of units and increase the profits, right? If you don't have those numbers, if you don't have that understanding, and you go to an investor and say, hey, we sell the CPG product for $10 a case, and then they're like, okay, $10 a case is great, but what does the profit margin look like? And you're like, okay, well, it costs us $8 to manufacture, so we make $2. Well, the investor wants to know you at least have 2.5x, right, on COGS. If you don't have at least 2.5x, well, then that's pretty high risk. Right now, at the very start, as long as you have enough traction, a lot of users, well, you don't need that 2.5x at the beginning. But the investor wants to know that if I invest the money, can you buy a larger lot, buy a larger batch size, and then get that closer to a 2.5x? If you can do that, and they understand the milestones, and understand everything that you've done to get to that point, well, then that de-risks the investor. And then number 10, it's just understanding what are your risk factors. right? So you have to do your own homework. You have to understand that there are obstacles that are unforeseen. Let's take, for example, 2020, there's COVID. A lot of startups, they're like, hey, we're going to do really good. We're scaling really well. We're importing stuff from China. We're manufacturing hardware, and all of a sudden COVID hits. And these import tariffs, supply chain is kind of broken. Can't get products. Products can't be made. Uh, you try to outsource the product somewhere else. Quality is not the same. Molds are not the same. I mean, all those factors, those are risks, right? So if you understand that, and you understand that in the startup world, nothing's going to be 100% perfect. You're not going to have to guarantee that, okay, we can do the same operation the exact same way for the next 3 to 5 years. And you just at least have those in your mind. You let the investor know. Well, then that de-risks the investor. And then after that, once you understand all those, well, pretty much all you have to do is say, hey, I understand this. I've done my due diligence. I have these notes in my data room. I have these, ideas in case someone has these questions. Then all you have to do is go out and talk to investors, right? And so when you talk to investors, you put together this sales funnel. Is what I call it, a sales funnel for finding investors, which you have 3 different types of responses, which is you have yes, you have maybes, and then you have no's. Right. So when you first talk to your investor, you have to find out, okay, are they a yes investor, are they maybe investor, or are they no? And then you categorize them. Right. So when you think about it, the yes investors, well, once you have those people, are they lead investors or are they follow-on investors? Well, if they're lead investors, that's great. I mean, the odds are most people aren't going to get that lucky and find the lead investor very early on. But that lead investor, they'll take the risk, they'll set the terms, they'll say, okay, everyone else should invest at these valuations, these terms. And that's like perfect world scenario. You get that person, you're good to go. You can find those follow-on investors. Odds are you're going to run into a lot of follow-on investors. And so you essentially just funnel them in and you would say, okay, these are the follow-on investors. You put them into this list of yeses. But then put a little check mark or put a little indicator saying that they are follow-on investors. And then everyone else who's a maybe that says, okay, I kind of like your idea, I like the concept. I'm not really sure. Then you put them into this maybe list. On top of that, you can also put investors that don't fit your investment minimums and then throw them into the maybes list, right? And then based on that, everyone else who says no, they're not interested investors, well, you put them into another list that's a no. Based on your no list, there's really other 2 outcomes. Well, it's no because it's a hard no, I don't want to be an investor, right? Or no, I don't trust you. I kind of want to be an investor, but no, it's not really maybe, it's a no. Well, the odds are like human nature. Most people, when they're being sold something or being told that they should invest in something, like 90% of people, immediately the first thing is like no. Well, it's not no because your product sucks or you're just not a good investment. Odds are it's no because there's a lack of trust. You don't know who you are. Right. So it's a prime example. I met some guy on the street and I'm like, hey, can I borrow $10? Right. The odds are he's gonna be like, who the heck are you? Why would I give you $10? Right. So when you think about that, it's a trust issue. It's not just if I went to a friend, I went to a family member and I said, hey, can I have $10? I'll give it back to you tomorrow. But the odds are because there's that trust factor, they'll give me the $10, right? And either way, it's just like that's the trust, right? So when you think about the no's, well, odds are they don't trust you, or clearly, you identified the wrong prospect. They're a hard no. They only invest in B2B and you're a B2C company. Well, then that's definitely a hard no. Now, on the flip side, when you look at the no's, even though they're not investors, doesn't mean they could potentially be users or customers. Right? So keep that in mind when you build these funnels. So essentially, as you build out these funnels, everyone you talk to, you put them into this list. Well, then you create a very specific email for the yeses and the maybes, and then a specific email for the no's. Right? And so the yeses emails could be, hey, these are the new features we're working on. This is a selfie of us with a meeting with another prospective group of investors. This is what we're working on. These are the updates. These are the partnerships we have, right? So that gets people excited. Right? So as you hit them with these emails every month, it builds trust. They see what you're doing. They really like, everything that they see. Well, then those yes follow-ons, well, they'd be like, oh, I'm more excited. I need to help you find a lead investor. Or maybe some of them, they could be a lead investor, but they typically will follow. And then they're like, okay, I really like this. I'm going to lead it and I'm going to help find other investors, right? Or your lead investor is like, okay, now's the time. You guys are yes, but I was just waiting for that little mountain or obstacle for you to overcome. You overcame it. Now I want to invest. Right? And then you have the maybes, which are, as you're updating them every month, over time it builds trust. And they go from the maybe and they say, okay, well, okay, this makes sense. I'm following the journey. I'm starting to trust this founder. I can see that they clearly can execute on this solution for this problem. Well, now I think I want to be an investor. Right? And so then it's a matter of you saying, okay, well, based on them being a maybe, should I let them into our cap table or should I not? Right? So if you let them in the cap table, great. I mean, you secured what you wanted to get done. If not, maybe their check size is too small. Let's say, your minimum was 100,000, they only invest 50,000. Well, great. Keep them in that maybe. That generates FOMO. When it generates FOMO, they're like, okay, I really want to get in on this deal. If you only need 100K, I got to figure out how can I syndicate 100K. I can invest and be in the cap table, or they just have to wait. Okay? And the longer they have to wait, the more antsy they get, especially if you push out a lot of new features, a lot of new updates, you get a lot of progress. And you got to think about for the standard average investor, it takes them about 3 to 6 months of trust building before they understand, okay, I really believe in the mission. I see the traction. I see the growth. I see what they can do. I see what they're capable of. And this guy is delivering. And then the other pile, well, you got to send another email for the nose, which is more of a customer email, right? You don't have to say invest, but you talk about, hey, we just saved X amount of customers, X amount of dollars. Or hey, we helped X amount of people do this. Or send an email about, well, thank you, let's say Christopher, for making this feature suggestion, which we implemented in patch 2.0. And so what you're doing is you're essentially identifying that you are listening to your community, you're validating that your community has good solutions, and you're actually creating features based on what they want. And so as a whole, your community, whether they're no investors or they're users, they'll be able to trust you, right? They'll say, okay, he's actually listening. How cool is it? Because most startups don't listen to the customers. They see that you're growing. They see that you have all these, great community responses, and then that builds trust. Maybe not from them directly, but it builds trust from everyone else in that community, which then adds value of trust to them between you. And based on that trust, they're like, oh, well, maybe I should invest. Maybe I don't know. Maybe now I'm a maybe, right? So then essentially you just take them, they start asking questions, or maybe without you putting them in the maybe file, they become maybes. And so we did this in the last company, raised traditionally from the yes investors, and everyone else was a maybe and a no. Well, there's a new good thing called equity crowdfunding, right? So since 2016, there's crowdfunding, which we talked about in the last, uh, last video. This new video, essentially, crowdfunding. This is like the perfect opportunity. So essentially, you close out all the traditional investment dollars, and then everyone else who's a leftover, or I don't want to say leftover, but everyone else who didn't quite hit that minimum, well, you can announce and send an email to all of them. Hey, we just launched our crowdfunding campaign. Our minimum check size is now $100. Well, then what you've done is you enabled all those people who didn't fit that initial 100,000 minimum to be able to invest. You gave them the opportunity to say, hey, I had all this FOMO built out. I didn't know if you're going to raise or not. And now they're like, okay, I'm not going to invest. And so what you see based on what we've done in the past with Wednesday is when we opened that up, we saw that, hey, all these people they're starting to invest. And then all these no's who are still customers, right? Customers, which means they trust the brand to save them money, but they didn't know like, hey, should we invest? We don't know anything about them. But now that they see the movement in the crowd that, oh, other people are trusting us through crowdfunding. And then they're like, oh yeah, I use you guys. I see other people trusting you guys. So then that secondary value of trust added that first primary value of trust. And then they saw, oh, okay, it's so easy and accessible. I mean, I have $100. I'd like to invest in that minimum. I'd like to join that story and be a part of this movement. And when you guys win, which is the startup wins, well, then they win too. And so really, once we understood these 10 factors, and we understood this mindset of how do we create these funnels, you know, that's why our crowdfunding campaign was so successful in raising capital from investors, and that's why our traditional raise was so successful. It was literally raised $4 million traditionally, and then the 1,070,000 we oversubscribed when we launched our crowdfunding campaign within 2 months. And on top of that, we launched the crowdfunding campaign at the absolute worst time to do it. We launched it in December, right? So like everyone that we emailed, everyone that we told about, like talked to about, everyone's on vacation, right? So no one's going to see it. Right? It comes back like January, then we start getting a couple of investor dollars, right? And then all of a sudden it starts picking up, and people see like, oh, people are actually investing. They're seeing the trust. They're seeing, oh, we saved X amount of dollars, or my friend saved X amount of dollars. They're telling other people about what we're doing. And then within 2 months, I mean, that's literally, boom, it just happened. Closed out that 1,070,000. And so you have to think about, like, from the user side, it's that trust aspect, right? So based on that trust, like I said earlier, there's like, literally, if I don't trust you, I might give you $100, but if I trust you, I'll give you $100 for you to give me back $100 the next day. And so as we built up this pipeline, well, magical things happen. You can think about the cost to acquire a customer. Well, technically we had a negative cost, right? Which is like literally unheard of. But when you think of the way we did it with crowdfunding, it's the customers themselves. They were sales and marketing ambassadors for the company. And not just that, they also invested in the company, meaning that we got money as they went out and sold our products and sold other people on investing and also using our service. Right. So that's like a new revolution to like why crowdfunding is so important when you're doing traditional raises. Now, you may get that backlash, and people are wondering, okay, well, why would you crowdfund when some VCs don't like it, traditional VCs? Well, the bottom line is, you think about like standard investor, it's like the money that you get from crowdfunding is still money. The money you get from a VC or whoever angel investor is still money. At the end of the day, money is still money. It's a matter of like, how did you utilize the crowd, the masses, to build up a community, to become customers, and also raise enough capital so you can go from point A to point B? Because that's what matters. At the end of your journey, every startup raise, it's how do you get from point A to point B? There's not really a right or wrong way on how you would get to that route, but there is a way of, okay, I got from point A to point B. Now our valuation has increased. Everyone who's invested in the initial round, the valuation has gone up. And so everyone who got in early, well, now you're winners. And so you really have to just think about, from that mindset, how do you do that? How does that happen? And so really that's literally how we did it. And that is the story of how do you raise capital.
Well, this is a great story, and I really liked the way you put it, not from the perspective of the pitch deck, what to put in a pitch deck, but actually those 10 steps they need to do, and specifically the funnel. I think taking it from the perspective of sales and putting your investors in a sales funnel and categorize them by how warm they are to get a deal with you. That's a great advice, I think, and emphasizing on breaking the ice and build a trust is another thing super important. Well, before I ask you my next question, everyone who is watching us, please press the like button. It's important to support us. At the same time, it will help YouTube algorithms to show this video to more people like you are. And please subscribe to this channel. Type your questions in the live chat. And if you have some challenge right now with your startup, we are here to answer you. Use this opportunity, and Ken will answer specifically your question. We are looking forward to get your questions. And once If it's a good question, we will ask Ken to answer it. My question to you, Ken, um, if, taking all what you've just covered, how would you summarize it, like in a quick steps to do for a founder starting fundraising campaign?
Yeah. So really do your homework, which is those 10 factors. Understand those. Understand that the investors are going to ask those questions, right? If they're a serious investor, if they, are going to do due diligence, if they're going to lead the round and not just, friends and family, they will ask those questions. Like I've spoken with over 1,300 investors. They all always ask the same thing, right? So
Yep.
that's like clearly validated. You just have those answers, and they're like, okay, you know the answers. You're not wasting my time. You know your stuff. That adds a value of trust, right? And then once you have that, it's a matter of building that funnel. And then the last thing, which I didn't really talk about, is not just building the funnel. It's letting people know who you are and what you're doing. Because if you don't let people know, then nobody's going to care. And no one cares if you're not going to get funded. Right? So you see startups that, crazy good idea, crazy good product, they don't get funded. And you see people who have like mediocre ideas, mediocre products, and they raise hundreds of millions of dollars. And you're like, how does that happen? And then they fail. Well, it's because they're the ones that got in front of people, they let them know this is what we're doing. They built the story, they built the trust. People want to invest in that story and that journey based on trust more so than what are you trying to do. And so I always recommend that you have to produce content, right? So you can do I recommend doing 2 to 3 LinkedIn posts a week. You can do Instagram posts, Facebook posts, Medium posts, YouTube videos, blog posts, something that lets prospects, whether it be customers or investors, know who you are and what you're doing. And so when investors do due diligence or anyone looks you up, they look up your name, they literally find you on Google. You're literally the first page, first result. They find out who you are, what are you doing? Because that is part of their due diligence process. If they can't find you online, the odds are you're not going to get funded. So that's another step you literally must do. Just produce content.
Yep, and I think this is another very much undiscussed piece of advice being found on social media. So if you are doing some activities online, it will be indexed by Google more or less. Or if you do YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, absolutely agree with that. Like a couple of years ago, no one could find my name just because I wasn't active on social media. Once I've been doing some support for startups, it's everywhere right now, and everyone can do it. Everyone can build their social presence, and so it gives you some brick towards your towards your trust in front of investors. Well, we have one question from Susie. She says, thanks, Ken. Look forward to learning more about crowdfunding campaign for Wonderkid.
Yeah, is that a question or is that a statement?
So I guess she wants to hear some. I don't know. I don't know what is Wonderkid, but we discussed crowdfunding campaign. I guess this is something. Susie, if you can actually give your question so we can answer it. But I guess she wants to know how to do a crowdfunding campaign for Wonderkid, and what is Wonderkid? I have no idea.
Yeah. So really, crowdfunding campaign it's about utilizing that strategy that I said about your funnel, and then finding people who want to be a part of that journey, right? So it could be based on trust. It could be based on they're emotionally empowered by what you're trying to solve. And so based on that, you just add them into your community. You understand that they become followers, they become connections, they become people who they see value in what you're trying to create. And then based on that, it's as you amass these people, I mean, literally, everyone in general has $100. I know there's even 16-year-olds, they have $100. And if they see enough value, they trust, and they believe in this mission, it's a matter of amassing those people and then getting them to invest. right? And so when you think about that, the $100 check size doesn't seem like a lot, but when you think about it, it's every high net worth individual who could write $50,000, $100,000 check. They know at least 50 people who could write a $100 check. Right? And so as you create these ambassadors for your company who would invest this $100 check, well, they'll tell other people, and then they tell other people, and then based on them telling other people, that's how you build up this leverage of network effects. And so, a prime example is when we launched our crowdfunding campaign, we had people that were, just ordinary people writing a $100 check. Well, they saved X amount of money, and they went to the doctor, told the doctor, "Hey, I saved X amount of money on vacation rentals," right? And then based on that, the doctor's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to tell the surgeon when I go to the surgery, when we go into operation that I saved X amount of money on vacation rentals." And the surgeon says, "Hey, I saved X amount of money because I'm always traveling to hospitals. I'm always staying in different towns, different cities, and I got to pay all this money. And well, I'm using your guys' platform, and I'm saving money." And then they tell another surgeon who, odds are they do the same thing because they have to travel, which then tells another surgeon. Right? So then when you think about network effects, you could have one surgeon that says, "Hey, I really liked what they're doing. The doctor invested $10,000. I want to invest $40,000." And then based on that, the surgeons have that little I don't want to call it like pissing contest, but they say, "Hey, if you invested $40,000, I'm going to invest 50,000." And you have another surgeon's like, "Oh, I'm going to invest 70,000. I want to outdo all of you." Right? So when you think about that, it's a matter of, well, there's leveraging of network effects on one side of the equation, where people are trying to just subdue their friend because it's disposable income to them, right? And they're doing that because of the trust in their friend, because their friend trusted somebody else, who trusted someone else, who trusted somebody else, who trusted you, right? So that is how that trust ecosystem works. And so when you really think about that, and you think about like the trust in general, if someone trusts you, the money becomes irrelevant from a psychological perspective, right? So you think about it like psychologically. It's so subjective that money itself, there's literally no difference between a $100 investor and $1 million investor, because it's subjective to their disposable income, right? Because I can write $100 checks in a bunch of startups every day, right? And same thing, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, they write $1 million checks every day to startups, right? Does it affect us? Not really, right? He could write $1 million checks. It would affect me if I wrote $1 million checks. To him, it doesn't make any difference, right? And the reason they would write these big check sizes is based on the understanding of trust. Right? If they don't trust you, they don't know you, you're not getting $1 million. They trust you, they know you. Oh, $1 million is writing a $100 check to them, so they'll write it in the same way that I would write a $100 check. And so when you have that mindset and you go out and talk to these investors, at the end of the day, you have no idea from the crowdfunding perspective if this $100 investor believes in you so much he's going to tell someone else who can invest $10,000. And so really it's understanding that the energy, which some people say, oh, it takes so much energy to invest in crowdfunding or to find crowdfunding investors to get $1 million or whatever. Well, really, that's like the wrong way to look at it. It's yes, you have to do the unscalable at the beginning to invest energy in it, but based on the unscalable, you build that trust, you build that relationship with that individual, which empowers them to essentially replicate what they're doing and go and tell other people. And if they do that, then you essentially have a negative customer acquisition cost, right? They actually pay you, right, to invest in you, and then they go out and they get you customers for free. And so that is the main benefit of why I highly recommend crowdfunding. It's not just raising the capital, but it's the ability to scale really quickly by automating the process, by creating believers and creating the trust between individuals. And then of course, if you win, you have this exit, well then everyone's happy, and then you have a proven track record, and then you go on to the next startup and they're going to follow you, right? And you have amassed this large community. You de-risk the investors for future investments because you've done all of these things before. They understand that you're capable of executing, and they know, okay, well, if he's done before, he's going to do it again, right? So when you think about that, like prime example, you have, let's say, Elon Musk, right? He has SpaceX, he has Tesla, he has Neuralink, he had PayPal. It's like after PayPal, he had this proven track record. And anytime you look at his other companies, the first result on Google is Elon Musk. It's not Tesla. When you look up Tesla, it's Elon. Look up SpaceX, it's not SpaceX, it's Elon. It's because he built this track record. And all he did is he took the recipes for success, proven track record, everything is like put together, and he just replicated it. Right? So literally he can create any business. He can sell snow to an Eskimo, create a startup around it, and raise capital based on that track record. And that track record is based on trust. So that is like the key takeaway is talk to as many people as you can and get trust. And trust takes at least 3 to 6 months for unless you're friends of someone who's already like directly friends with somebody, on average it'll take 3 to 6 months. And then after that 3 to 6 months, then they trust you, they understand you. And then it's a matter of yes or no. It's really that simple, like very replicable.
Yep. So building trust is also building your social presence through building your personal brand. You will be building many companies probably as an entrepreneur, but in the end of the day, you are behind all of those companies. And the way you build it, the way you succeed or fail, it will remain on social online with you as your personal brand, and so develop it, build your reputation. I guess this is what as a summary you mean as well. I guess we may take 1 or 2 more questions if anyone wants to ask their personal question related to their fundraising challenges. I have one other question. Recently happened. This story recently happened, and it's kind of typical issue for many founders, but not everyone gets to this result. Well, plenty of founders who doing fundraising campaign, they have a challenge in with sales skills, and it's one thing. The other thing, they have a very complicated product, or the way they deliver this product is a very complicated way of explaining it. So, and it doesn't work in terms of fundraising. And one of the founders I know, so he gave up on pitching himself because his pitch is horrible, and he understands that, and he's got lots of feedback on that, and he's trying to make it better. But I mean, he went the other way. What he did, he started, I guess, LinkedIn campaign. He targeted the investors in his industry with the check he looks for, and he started reaching them out in a sales funnel way of breaking the ice, activating the lead, and getting them to a conversation without the pitch. And so with a very short period of time, he managed to close 500K round. Yeah, he's still in fundraising mode, but he's got 500K already. So what's your take on this? Is it a common thing? And do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is pitching, especially technology products instead of hardware products. Technical products are, they could be a little bit more complicated. And so unless it's hardware and you try to explain software, investors can get confused. And then on top of that, when you add the layer of, hey, I am going to, solicit you. I don't know who you are. I'm going to throw you a pitch deck. I'm going to throw you like 6 paragraphs on LinkedIn after I connect with you. Well, the odds are like, anybody who's watching this, if you do that to me, I'm not going to answer. The reason is I don't know who you are. I also don't like to read 6 paragraphs on the first connection. And then on top of that, in order for me to read 6 paragraphs and then open the pitch deck, that's more work I don't want to do. And so when you think of me, I get like 40 of these requests every week, and I'm not even a big investor. So when you think of other investors who get hundreds of this a week, it's really refreshing to see someone that says, hey, I just want to have a general conversation. And then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll take that conversation. It's more relaxing. It's not like, oh, he's trying to sell me something. Oh, I have to read, or I have to do all this work before I know what he's trying to do. And then, if it's software, I mean, you could just say in one sentence, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And then one sentence, what are you doing? And show them a demo. Like the less you say, the more you sell, right? You say more stuff, you're complicated, the investor's confused, and like, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? You don't want to do that. And so if you can show them a demo, I mean, boom, they clearly understand it, they see it, it works, makes sense. Maybe they can download it, they can try it, works, it makes sense. Then they'll be more likely to invest. The other side is, if you, you have no idea how to make those conversations, maybe you're too technical, then you got to find someone on your team, maybe a co-founder, maybe a salesperson, somebody who can talk, somebody who can say, like, this is what we're doing, this is how we do it, and this is how we can be very clear about it. And then that way the investor is like, oh, okay, it's understandable. I'm not confused. And boom, that's done. Right. So really it's understanding. If you can't do it, find somebody who can do it. If you have no choice and you have to do it yourself, make sure you have a demo so that you can just show them or just let them play with it. Because when an investor can play with something, the reactions and impressions that they would get is significantly more than what you can say in a very short period of time. And then based on that,
Yeah,
then they're like, okay, I get it or I don't get it. So that's how I would do it. And so
yeah,
I
he
can see
gets
how you
personal
guys,
attachment again.
I can see how it was easier for me to raise capital from doing it from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, I suggest to wrap this up, and everyone who would have more questions, you can still write your questions in the comments below after we finish the stream. If any one of those who are watching us have any questions to Go Global World, you would like to become an ambassador in a specific country, or you would like to speak at Go Global World, and you have some topic expertise that can help other entrepreneurs in the world, we are open for this. Reach us out at info@goglobal.world. And of course, we would highly appreciate your support with distributing this video to more entrepreneurs, because we truly want to help. So repost, reshare this video, and subscribe to our channel. Ken, thanks so much for giving these insights and recommendations. I mm, uh, um, I actually think this kind of talk was unusual to other talks on fundraising, because you put it in other perspective, where you emphasize on building trust, building funnel, building your social presence. We all know all the stuff about what we need to put in the pitch deck, so it's very, very easy to find. But how to close an investor with all this activation thing, how to break the ice, I think that was super helpful. What would be your final say to the global audience of our community as your final recommendation, or something you may share from your heart?
Yeah. Final recommendation is, you there's going to be a lot of people that say, no, your idea is not good. I don't like you. Your product sucks. It doesn't work. But you have to think about it and say, okay, it doesn't work right now. Maybe you're in alpha stage. Maybe, maybe you're just not there yet. But you have to think about, from your competitors, everyone else who's trying to solve the same problem that, the investors probably see before. You're all competing for the same thing. And so from the investor's point of view, if you look at it, it's, well, if everyone's competing for the same thing, who's actually going to survive the marathon versus the sprint? Who's going to get to year two? Once year two is done, who's going to get to year three? After year three, I mean, the risk of an investor investing in a startup that survived year two, getting into year three, is significantly lower, even if you're solving the same thing, right? Because technically, core technology, advances in how you do stuff, anybody can copy that. But what ends up happening is, by year two and year three, you've built together a community, a list of customers, a list of potential investors. You've built together this trust network, and that's something that's not replicable, right? I can literally, let's say, if I wanted to create my own Go Global community, right, I can make my own Go Global, do essentially the same thing, streaming and whatnot. But the problem is I don't have that community, right? And so in order to go out and do that community, that's something that, if they already trust Go Global, they're not going to go out of the way and say, oh, Ken's copying, I'm gonna join him, right? And so when you think about that, and you think about other startups. I mean, if you're creating a social media platform, well, if you're good, next 6 to 7 months, someone's going to try and copy it. But the thing is, it's not going to copy it if that's going to be better. It's if they copy it, do you have a strong enough moat of community to support you that your community members aren't going to leave and join them, right? So as long as you add value to them, they're not going to leave, which means they're going to waste their time doing it. And so that's why you see a lot of larger companies, let's say Facebook in particular, they're not going out and building more companies. They're just buying companies because they know they don't have the means to go out and create those new communities and then build them up. They have plenty of money, they have plenty of resources, they have plenty of engineering, but it's that community that they can't replicate it. And so that's why they go out and they buy these companies who essentially build up the community. And then they just take those communities and then they add it to their community. They have this massive community. And so you have to think about that from the investor's point is they do the same thing. They look at, okay, who has this very strong community and is that strong enough to protect them against competitors? And if it is, then that it makes it a very investable, highly de-risked investment, which usually happens around year 2 to year 3, that transition.
Awesome. Thanks. That was Ken Ma, and we discussed fundraising methods to get a check. Ken, please stay here. Everyone who was watching us, thanks for staying with us. Again, like, subscribe, and we look forward to see you soon. Next week, we will have a talk with a speaker from Netherlands, how to pitch with purpose for impact startups, David Beckett. And on March 7th, we will have female founders speaking about discrimination when building businesses, and they will share their stories and advise how to avoid these kind of issues. Thanks, and have a great the rest of your days wherever you are.